So thank you again for coming for this important meeting. As you know, we have our consultant Emily Payne from HHM Incorporated from Austin. For some of you guys who were there at the first meeting in June, that was the initial introductory meeting. Since then, Emily and her team has surveyed these neighborhoods extensively, and then she's here tonight to share her findings with you all. So I will give the presentations to her.
Hi, everyone. My name is Emily Payne. I'm from HHM in Austin. I'm an architectural historian. A few housekeeping issues. We have some folks on Zoom tonight and some folks here in person. So if you can't hear, please let us know. Folks on Zoom, if you can stay muted and put your questions into chat. When we get to the questions section, we'll make sure that we go over that and make sure that we repeat the questions so everyone can hear. But if you can't hear, be sure to let us know whether you're on Zoom or in person. Okay, can everyone hear now? Is that better? Okay. Yep. Okay. So our agenda for this evening, I think there's a little, is there a lag? Let's see. See what happens here. Okay, let's see. Now let's try to make sure that we're seeing this on Zoom too. Okay. Okay, hopefully we're all in the same place now. Okay, so our agenda for tonight, first just introductions, and then we'll talk about the project purpose, why we're doing this, and the project scope, and then move on with a little background, frequently asked questions, our survey findings, our future recommendations, some opportunities for you to give input on the project, and then questions. I think we're going to try to hold questions to the end if we can. We've tried to anticipate your questions as much as possible, so hopefully we'll answer them before we get there. If you're on Zoom, you can go put questions in the chat, but if you can, kind of put them in the parking lot and hold them till the end because I'm hoping we'll answer them. Okay, introductions. So the project team is led by the City of Plano, Bhavesh with the Heritage Preservation Office at the City of Plano is the lead for this project with the city. And then we also have Eric and Nick who are assisting with the city. HHM and Associates is a preservation consulting firm based in Austin. We're founded in 1983. We do exclusively preservation work across, mostly in Texas, but also across the nation. So I'm Emily Payne. I'm here tonight. I'm managing the project. And then my colleagues who you may have seen out and about are Christina and Charlotte, who you probably saw taking photographs in the summer and who are assisting with the report production. Okay, the project purpose. Why are we doing this project? So this project will feed into the Heritage Preservation Plan. What is the Heritage Preservation Plan? It's a document that defines the goals and objectives for Plano's Heritage Preservation Program. So key objectives for the plan are to update the survey every 5 years. You might remember we were here in 2018 doing the same thing. We're just updating. To maintain an updated inventory of properties, neighborhoods that are at least 50 years old. And so our current focus is areas that are built between 1970 and 1975. Those resources that are just now turning 50 years old. And then we also, as part of the Heritage Preservation Plan, Bhavesh will be maintaining a list of potential heritage resources. They're not heritage resources, they're potential heritage resources, and we'll get into that definition soon.
Emily, I think you're
on Zoom. Okay. Housekeeping, sorry about this. This hybrid world that we live in is that better on Zoom? No? Okay. Is that better on Zoom?
There you
Okay, there we go. Thank you, Nick. Thanks for calling that out. I can't see you guys and Zoom and my screen at the same time. So thankfully I have Nick here to help me out. Okay, the project scope. So where are we? The scope of work and deliverables. We kicked off in last March. We held a public meeting in June. I recognize a lot of faces from then. And then we were out in the field and processing survey data in June and July. So we took photographs, we did GIS-based mapping, we did a lot of data analysis, produced a draft survey report between August and November. And here we are with the second public meeting. And then starting tomorrow, there will be a public comment period. The report will be posted online for everyone to review it. And then we'll move on to accepting comments and presenting the document to the Heritage Commission in December, January. Okay, so what was our survey area? We surveyed 569 individual parcels of land and 123 subdivisions. So those 569 parcels were in neighborhoods that were surveyed in 2018, but the 2018 survey recommended that more research was required to really make recommendations about them. And then the 123 subdivisions are those things that were constructed or construction began between 1970 and 1975. You may be thinking my house was built in the 80s. Why was I included? It's because something in your subdivision plat, that neighborhood was developed beginning in that 1970 to 1975 era. It doesn't mean it was totally built out, but development began in that era. Okay, defining the levels of survey. So neighborhoods we surveyed at the windshield level. There's a lot of detail here. Don't try to read it. It's just to give you an idea that for the windshield level, we were looking at the neighborhood as a whole. We weren't documenting every single house. We were trying to just get a feel of the neighborhood as a whole, about when the houses were built, what styles are they, about what size are they, what are the landscape features, just trying to get a feel for what holds the neighborhood together, versus the reconnaissance level survey documented every single house within, and outbuildings too, within that survey area. Okay, a little bit of project background. Everything in this project is driven by Plano's Heritage Preservation Ordinance. So that was has been in place since 1979. It's been updated a few times, and the most recent update was in 2021. So what does the ordinance do? It says that Plano will have a Heritage Commission, a Heritage Preservation Officer, which is Bavesh, and that the duties of the preservation officer will be to maintain a heritage preservation plan and to conduct heritage resource surveys. Now, the preservation officer also manages designation of heritage resources. That is not part of this project. This project is just the plan and the survey. A lot of words, but a few definitions. Okay, we're just going to focus on the meat. So what is a heritage landmark? It's a structure or site that has cultural or historic or archaeological importance that has received designation from the city council. In Plano, to date, it's always been initiated by the owner. They file an application to request this, and it has to go before the city council. A heritage district is a neighborhood or a collection of buildings that have cultural, archaeological, historic significance that have received designation from the city council as a unified district. There's been an application filed. It's gone through a public process. It's been received. Property owner consent requirements. So to get this designation, either all property owners have to consent, or by state law, 3/4 of every city commission that reviews it has to be approved at by a supermajority at every single board and commission. So typically, there's a very high level of property owner consent required to move forward with a heritage landmark or heritage district. That is not what's happening here. Right now, we're just talking about potential. So moving on, PHR, that's Plano acronym for Potential Heritage Resource. A potential heritage resource is a property that's listed in the preservation plan that may have historical or archaeological or cultural significance, but it has not been designated. The same thing with a potential heritage district. It may have significance, but it has not been designated. Again, to get designated, there would have to be property owner initiation, property owner consent, and a series of public hearings with the Heritage Commission and City Council with a vote. That's not happening here. That would be in the future. That would be a separate process. We're just talking about this potential list that goes into the preservation plan. Okay, a spotlight of a PHR. I think this is a great example. It's the Texas pool. In 2018, the last preservation plan recommended the Texas pool as a potential heritage resource. It just was on a list in the plan. And then the owners of the pool, the neighborhood, thought, wow, this is great. We want to be a heritage landmark. So the owners worked with Befesh. They filed an application and they got designated as a landmark, and they were so excited and they wanted to share the news. No one went out to do that. They were excited about it. They took the initiative. They chose to go through that process. Okay. So neighborhood conservation district. This is a new designation category since 2018. So a neighborhood conservation district is a residential neighborhood only. In Plano, it can't be any other type of neighborhood. It's only a residential neighborhood. The buildings have to be at least 35 years old. And there has to be something about the neighborhood that kind of holds together as having distinctive architectural character, planning characteristics, visual character. And again, it must receive designation from the city council. So it must be initiated by property owners. The city is not going to come out and start an application. The property owners have to submit the application. It can only be initiated by property owners. And at least 60% of the property owners must sign a petition wanting to get the process started. And the potential neighborhood conservation district that goes on the list in the preservation plan, again, is a residential neighborhood that may have eligibility as a potential conservation district. It has not yet received a designation. It just has the potential to become one if the owners choose to initiate that process. Okay. So the neighborhood conservation district has a manual that is really very helpful. I have a QR code here. That QR code should also be on the agenda. So if you want, and there are some printouts. So if you want to learn more about the conservation district, since it is a new planning tool, I really recommend that you grab the printouts, go to the website, talk to me afterwards, talk to Vivesh afterwards, and we can give you more information about that tool. So why would someone choose an NCD? Why would a neighborhood opt to initiate an NCD? So an NCD can be a useful tool to maintain neighborhood character, especially in older neighborhoods where the zoning regulations may allow greater square footage or height or lot coverage than what used to be there. So for example, if you are a neighborhood of mostly one-story houses and the neighbors get together and there is consensus that we don't want three-story houses, this is a tool that you can choose to implement if you want to, okay? To prevent this mansionization and to have a set of design, a process for design review. The neighborhood would help choose what goes into that process, and to just maintain the general rhythm and style and streetscape, and also retain the general residential feel of the neighborhood. Okay, so heritage district versus NCD. Now again, this is talking about designation, and that's only if the owner chooses. Okay, none of this would happen unless you as an owner or you as a group of owners choose to initiate this process. But if you choose to initiate this process, what's entailed after designation? So a heritage district, the intent is to protect the individual building's architectural style and historic character. A conservation district is to just protect the overall look and feel of the neighborhood. So a heritage landmark needs to be 50 years old. Conservation district, most of the buildings need to be 35 years old. Is Heritage Commission review required for alterations? For a heritage district or a heritage landmark, yes. For a conservation district, no. What kind of changes would require review? The heritage district, new construction, additions, exterior alterations, and demolitions that would have review by the staff and the Heritage Commission. Neighborhood conservation, it would be new construction, addition, and major alterations if your group chooses to put that in. It would be basically you as a neighborhood would design the standards, and you as a neighborhood would choose what gets reviewed and how you want to review it. So the design guidelines for Heritage District would be provided by a professional. If anyone is interested and you want to see the Haggard Park design standards that neighborhood chose to implement, those are on the city's website, and that was something that a professional prepared. A neighborhood conservation district would be prepared by a grassroots group of neighbors. Their design standards. You would work together to decide, do we want flat roofs on new houses, or do they need to have pitched roofs? Those kind of things. There would be assistance from the city if you requested it, but really it's meant to be a grassroots process. Demolition restrictions. A heritage conservation district, yes. I mean, a heritage district, yes. A neighborhood conservation district, no. It's not about making you keep the fabric that's there. It's about the overall look and feel. Financial incentives. Now, the stricter regulations in a heritage district do come with tax incentives. There are none in a conservation district. And are there use restrictions? In a heritage district, yes, somewhat. It's really more about making sure the use is compatible with zoning and with the building, but not in a conservation district. Okay, so basically, some people call conservation districts like heritage district light, but it's really just a kind of zoning tool, a zoning overlay tool that has a lot of grassroots input. Okay, so neighborhood conservation districts can be an architectural model or a planning model. So an architectural model conservation district is generally about maintaining the style of the houses. Like there are a number of conservation districts in Dallas, and some of the best known ones have Tudor architecture. You can still tear down your old Tudor, but if you build it back, it needs to be Tudor. So the districts we're looking at are kind of more ranch, but the concept would be if you could still tear down your ranch house, but if someone builds a new one, it needs to be generally in keeping with the ranch style architecture if it's in the architectural model. But there's also the planning model, which is not at all about the style. It's just really about maintaining the setbacks and the scale, and in some cases, the landscaping. So you just want to make sure that new houses are generally keeping the front yard, they're not built all the way to the lot line. If there are street trees, they're maintaining those street trees. If they all have slope roofs, those general planning characteristics. And again, the neighbors would work together to choose which is the best fit. We've made some recommendations about which of those options is eligible, but if you're eligible for both, you would work together to choose which is the best fit for you. Okay, frequently asked questions. Hopefully we've gone over some of this already, but I really want to drive it home. We always hear this. Will this project change the zoning on my property? No. No zoning change. The survey will only make recommendations for listing in the Heritage Preservation Plan. We are providing a list that will go into the preservation plan. Will this change my property taxes? No. It's just a list in the plan. Will this change my HOA requirements or impose additional regulations? No. No designation is happening. It's only a list of recommendations. Will this affect my property rights? No, nothing is happening. To date, the city of Plano has not designated anything over owner objection. Everything has been owner initiated. Everything has to comply with Texas state law, which is very property rights driven. So no, this is an owner initiated process. If I want to designate my property neighborhood based on recommendations, how will that work? If you're interested, talk to Bhavesh. He can give you more information about how the process will work. Okay, the survey findings, digging into all the big survey area that we went through, digging into what we found. So we surveyed 692 resources. 569 of those were those individual parcels and 123 were subdivisions. So we recommended out of that big group, 10 individual PHRs. So out of the 569 individual buildings, we're only recommending 10 of them as potential heritage landmarks. We're recommending 5 potential heritage districts, and then 33 potential neighborhood conservation districts. Almost all of them can be either the planning model or the architectural model, depending on what the neighbors want. There's only one that really only has planning characteristics, not architectural distinction. And then there are 7 resources that we're saying we need a little bit more information. There's more research required. Okay, this gives you an example of the recommended individual PHRs. The most common reason is association with a significant person that lived in the house. But there also are some fun community landmarks. And I think probably the most notable one is Country Burger, which is, just it, the city of Plano's criteria have some very community-driven criteria. So criteria 6 is for things that represent an established familiar feature of the city. 8, that is a unique location that is just a familiar part of the city. And again, is anyone going out to designate the Country Burger? No. If the Country Burger's owners are interested, they can come to Bavesh and talk about the process. The recommended PHR districts. There's Briarwood, which is an expansion of a district that was recommended in 2018. So most of that neighborhood was built in the 1960s, but there's part that was built in the 1970s that we're recommending to pull into that potential district. Haggard Addition and Ollie Matthews. The Owens Grain Company, which is along the railroad track just east of downtown. It's really one of the few remaining industrial milling facilities in Plano. Park Forest and Southwood. So Haggard Addition, Ollie Matthews is an example of one of the districts we're saying is a potential heritage resource district if they want to be. So this is 806 Haggard Street. This district meets 3 criteria, 1, 2, and 3. So it meets the designations for heritage landmark. It's a unique neighborhood of the city. But it's a collection of properties. It's not just one. Okay, our potential NCDs. There are 34 of them. You don't need to process this list. If you're wondering, you can look at the map. You can come up to talk to me afterwards. You can talk to Bavesh afterwards. And the list everything will be online. The presentation will be online. A recording will be online. The report will be online tomorrow. So you can look at it in more detail. A few examples of the potential NCDs. So Wood Park is an example that just meets the planning criteria. It's not exceptionally distinctive because of its architecture, but it does kind of have a rhythm and a streetscape of consistent townhouses, houses scale. Park Forest could be potential architectural model. It has, some more mid-century modern influenced architecture that's consistent. If the neighborhood was interested in writing design guidelines to encourage new construction to be mid-century modern ranch style also. And then Los Rios is a district that kind of is an example of both, right? It's got the street trees and the consistent setbacks, distinctive streetscape, street pattern, but then it also has some distinctive contemporary architecture. Okay, our future recommendations. So this is taking all of this and like what are we recommending that Bavesh do with the information? 1, create a GIS layer with all the prior heritage designations and sharing it online so that it's accessible. Combining the 2018 and 2023 heritage data in a GIS database shared online, just to make sure that this is all transparent. Meeting with owners of potentially eligible resources to educate them about the designations and talk it through. Assist interested property owners with the designation process. Make some clarifications in the preservation ordinance just to make sure that the readers, it's totally clear. And then discuss the NCD criteria with stakeholders and to see if there's anything that needs to be done in that ordinance to be clear. Nowhere does it say go out and designate things. It only says talk to people who are interested in designating things and work to share data and work to make the policy documents more clear, more transparent for everybody. Okay, Opportunities for input. We're almost done. We're almost to questions. 1, the second draft report will come out for public comment tomorrow. It'll be on the Heritage Preservation website. There's a link here. There's a QR code in your plan. And 2, the online comment form. If you're interested in reviewing the document and giving us comments, you can use this online form. There are also paper forms in the back that you could give to Bhavesh and share with us. So I know it's a lot to process now. If you want to sit down with the document, read through it, and then submit more feedback, those are ways to do it. Okay. Questions. You all were very patient. That's a lot of information. And I know we have questions coming both from Zoom and from the room. So hopefully we'll kind of try to moderate and alternate a little bit. Sir, I see a question there.
Are you giving out your presentation in the mail eventually, so we'll know what's going on? I remember last week.
The question was, are we giving out the presentation and the maps? The answer is yes. Tomorrow, everything will be posted online. This presentation, a recording of the presentation, and the full report will be posted online tomorrow. Your agenda, I'll go back to the QR code of where it's going to be posted online for the people on Zoom so that they can copy down that link. And anyone who got a paper agenda here tonight should have that link and the QR code on their agenda. And if you can take a photo of it real quick too, if you need to, but and you can also contact me, contact Bhavesh if you're having trouble getting to it. We should be able to help you. Okay, do we want to take a question from Zoom? No questions so far. Okay, sir. Okay, the question was, I live in Haggard Addition. How close are we to being designated as a historic district? My answer to you is no closer than you were yesterday or 5 years ago or 10 years ago. That neighborhood has met the criteria for a long time. And now there will be on a list that says you meet the criteria, but that doesn't change. You still have to actually get the property owner to sign the petition. You have to actually do the nomination, and there has to be political support for it. So that neighborhood filed an application that was voted down by city council. So, the political support for it is that changes day to day. But putting this on a list, it's been eligible. It just hasn't been officially on a list that's eligible before. And it met the criteria and was approved by the Heritage Commission before and was voted down by city council. So you're kind of in the same place as you've been. Does that clarify things? Okay. They're eligible. So they're eligible. So being eligible is different than, so generally what we look at and what the Heritage Commission looks at is eligibility based on the criteria that are in the ordinance. But when it comes to a city council vote, they can vote based on whatever they choose. They don't have to base their vote on the ordinance criteria. So you are eligible, you've been eligible, but there still will always be that city council approval part of the process that's there. There was a woman in the back had a question.
Well, I think you just
Okay.
So if you're going on this submission, then you go to city council, they can veto it.
Yeah, the question was, if you go through all the process, when you go to city council, they can veto everything. Is that correct? Yes, that is correct. Correct. And that is per Texas state law. So per Texas state law, city council has the valid preservation ordinance. City council has to be the final vote. And if there is not 100% sign on, it has to be a supermajority at city council. So even if just one person objects, it has to be a supermajority. That is Texas state law. Okay, yes, sir. The list of 33 neighborhoods that were potential. It's on a map here. You can come talk to me. You can talk to Bhavesh, and it will all be online tomorrow. This site here, this second, right?
Draft survey report on this.
Yes, correct. That's where it will be tomorrow. And there's a map that has those 33 recommended conservation districts over at the side of the room. And at the end, we can break. And if people have questions about specific neighborhoods, we'll be here to answer those questions. Any questions from Zoom? Okay, great. Sir. Southwind? Mhm.
But what are the real benefits that accrue to the resident of one of these NCDs that are, you know, I mean, what are the, not the soft side benefits that, oh, well, it helps preserve the look of the neighborhood and, oh, you know, we want to keep our terms, et cetera, et cetera. I live right down the street from a whole pile of expensive condos and townhouses that are being built on property that's less than a half a mile from me. And this NCD threatens the potential property value or property value increase that I might experience if somebody could come in to my neighborhood, because there ain't nothing on either side except a bunch of crummy apartments. So we're like an island. But
I hear you.
so what benefits accrue to me by getting into one of these NCDs?
Okay, so the question was what benefits come from the NCDs and kind of how do those counterweigh the changes that to your property value that you if you had fewer regulations. So one, the benefits are really mostly about the neighborhood look and feel. And again, it's if your neighborhood values that, it's an option for you. So for example, you know, it also is an opportunity to have some sort of process for reviewing what's coming into your neighborhood. Now, you could write the design standards to say that you can have condos or townhouses. I mean, the neighborhood is going to write the design standards together. Theoretically, it hasn't been done yet, but you know, if you want to be a test case. So it's not regulating use. It's not going to say what the capacity could be, but that's going to be based on your base zoning. In terms of economics, the economics of preservation and regulation are very complicated, and it's not a direct correlation. And NCDs aren't truly, you know, aren't the economic impact studies that have been done have been based on historic districts. So a much stricter zoning category than NCD. But the historic district kind of nationwide studies show that heritage districts maintain their property values. They don't experience the same degree of high highs, and they don't experience the same degree as high lows. They weather the ups and downs a little bit more evenly, but there's not a dramatic change. Again, it's all local. There are lots of exceptions, but that's just the general trend. Back of the room in the back corner.
This is not a question, but I. What is the benefit? Our neighborhood was pretty vulnerable, and so we didn't do the heritage designation just for the kumbaya of it. It was a protective measure because absentee landlord, you know, property values that are kind of declining, property for being older. It protects us from absentee landlords, flippers, and people who want to tear something down and build something a looming monstrosity, if I may be polite about it, like there's. But it's the single best thing we ever did, because as our neighborhoods mature, and I'm speaking probably to most of the people in this room, people are starting to pick off the houses that they can buy and use as an investment. So it really just kind of starts, if there's no barrier out there, people see that when they go buy the house, they think, maybe I'll think twice about it. That's when you could say, it's been nothing but learning.
So for the folks on Zoom, just to repeat, there was a property owner in the Haggard Park Heritage District, which that neighborhood opted to designate a heritage district, saying that it has protected the neighborhood from threats of absentee landlords and flippers in her opinion, and that it has stabilized property values from what has given them options with the design guidelines that they designed with the city, in her opinion, in her experience. There was someone in the front row here. So the question was, once a resource is designated, is it always designated, or can it be changed? There is a process for changing, but unless someone initiates the process to change it, it will stay intact, in effect. Sir?
Stop these rental houses that are being painted white all over the city. They're coming in, I got 3 of them within 200 feet of my house. First thing they do is paint them white. They're all over the city, they're all over everywhere. How could you stop them from doing this?
So the question
We're
is,
a little bit late.
the question is, how could you stop the rental houses all over this, that are being painted white? Well, it's not the rental use. There's nothing that can be done about the rental use, but how could you stop it from painting them white and doing and changing the style? So either a heritage district or a neighborhood conservation district would include design standards. So your design standards, one, they could talk about painting brick, because that's not only about color, that's about maintaining the integrity and the condition of that material. If you don't do it right, it can really lead to decay. And 2, talking about what colors are appropriate for the era of your neighborhood. Again, that would be if that's something that you have consensus with your neighbors about wanting to talk about. It would have to be consensus-driven design standards document. And in terms of color, that's typically that can be a controversial issue. So getting consensus with your neighbors would have to be a big discussion, but it is something that could be included if there's interest. Yes, sir.
I would just like. The houses. But. So they're all done. This is an example. I think it would be my house. This is an example. If there's houses already there that. It's already done right, that's tough. It's already been done. Is that true?
So the question is, if there are houses that are where it's already been done, where they're already white, is it too late? Okay. Is it too late to make them reverse those alterations? So this is kind of a complicated question. If it were a heritage district, but in a conservation district, almost everything is going to be what we call contributing, which means it contributes to the character, unless it's brand new or is really not part of the neighborhood. In a heritage district, every single building would get a contributing or non-contributing designation. And to get the tax incentives, you'd have to be contributing. Now, does paint color alone make you non-contributing? No. However, very often these alterations are not just paint color, it's paint color and ripping off the old porch and building a new porch and replacing the windows and doing other changes too. Okay, so if a house is non-contributing, because it's altered, in order to access the tax incentives, it would have to reverse those alterations and become contributing again. Is there is there anything else I need to say to clarify that?
I think that's one thing. Talking about changing the paint color. NCD. That. An illustrating example. My real point was, what is the offense, whatever it is over.
It's probably grandfathered.
Probably not. So, yeah, so it is already happened in the new designated. It's probably grandfathered, but I think by the extension, that issue could be what we're asking you to be, because it already was.
Well,
Very different.
It depends.
If you're doing it, then you are the neighborhood. Whether you want to form in the city or not.
but so if I'll go back to the eligibility slide. So first of all, you need to see whether your neighborhood's eligible. So out of those 123 subdivisions, there are 5 recommended PHR districts and 33 potential NCDs. The ones that are, the rest of them that are not recommended eligible, a lot of them have those alterations, and it's just a question of how many. There can be some, but it can't overwhelm the whole neighborhood. So you'll really need to look at your individual neighborhood and see what the recommendation is, because you're right. There may have been so many alterations that it's not eligible anymore, whereas the zoning category is not even an option for you because you don't meet the criteria. Yes.
Or homeowners, then you can as an HOA thing and see if the HOA would, look into regulating the people.
You mentioned something about tax incentives.
Yes. I'll go to that slide. Well, so tax incentive is only for heritage landmarks. Or heritage districts, and Bhavesh, do you want to talk about that a little bit more? Let's see.
Landmarks, is part of a district like Tiger Park or downtown. So if you are one of those buildings that are designated, then you are eligible to participate in the tax exemption program. And again, it's voluntary, so you can choose to participate or not to participate. So, but again, I think there are 4 classifications. You could get as much as 100% tax exemption. If you are a landmark, that's the highest tier of designation in Plano. So if you are used for residential use and you're a landmark, you can get 100% tax exemption. But if the same building is used for non-residential, then it cuts down to 50% of tax. Likewise, if a landmark is used for, I'm sorry, I got it reversed. If you're a contributing structure in the district that is not a landmark and you're used for residential use, you get 70% tax. And the same contributing structure that is used for non-residential use, you get 38%, half of that 38% tax. So those are the 4 tiers we have: 100, 50, 75, and 38.
And Bhavesh is talking about city ad valorem taxes, so your city taxes, but also being a designated heritage landmark or in a heritage district gives you access to state and federal tax credits too for a qualified rehabilitation. But that has to be for the federal program, it has to be an income producing building. So either a commercial building or rental residential. And for the state tax credit, it has to be, it can be nonprofit, but it's a little complicated. You'd sell the credit on the secondary market or income producing. But that's a kind of a complicated program. Come talk to me afterwards if that's something that you are specifically interested in. There's no tax incentive for NCDs. Okay, that's great.
Taxing entity, Collin County, has their new tax abatement program that the property can directly apply and take advantage of. So in general, you are eligible to get tax exemption from all 4 tax entities.
But that's
It's very.
On your land.
It's not the land value, it's only on the building. The exemption is not on the land value. It's only on the improvement value.
So for those folks on Zoom, Bhavesh clarified that the local exemptions are for the school district also, and that there is a county exemption that can be applied for. And someone from the audience clarified that that exemption is on your improvement value. It's not an exemption for your land value. It's on the improvement value. Sir? Okay, that's easy. That's geographic information systems. Basically, it's a system that ties a spreadsheet to a point in space. So there will be an interactive map that you click on it, the information pops up. Sir in the back? Oh, no. I'll get you next, I promise.
And the gentleman here that said, hey, in the future, when the property is more valuable than the house, we'll have an opportunity to tear it down and sell it. If you get into the NCD, okay, you will not have that opportunity. Also, I'm familiar, the Plano Heritage District. If you have a house there that is a 2-bedroom house, okay, drive around that area. Some of the houses are beautiful, don't misunderstand me, and they've been preserved, but others need to be torn down. That's my opinion, okay? But let's talk about the city and what they're doing right around the block here. You mentioned 3-story buildings. You don't want that. Well, they're building 3-story townhouses, number one. Number two, they're putting 21 houses right across the street from the church. And they're matchbox lots. And are they gonna be 3-story? Eric, you can tell me that. 2.5. Yeah, but.
So I want to try to break it up and make sure that I repeat what you said on, so that the folks on Zoom can hear you. Okay, so when I repeat it, correct me if I don't get it right. Okay.
Maybe 80. Okay. They formed it, and then you put 21. For the tax, which is okay, that's the city's prerogative. But for you to tell me that I can't tear down the house if the neighborhood votes 60% to be in an NCD district, okay? And build whatever I want to, after paying taxes for 42 years, I object. I only object that you said everybody has to go to the city to see if they can qualify for the NC district, and I'm saying, you're promoting this.
Okay,
Okay.
so let me make sure that everyone who is on Zoom has heard it. So the issue is that as a taxpayer for 42 years, the possibility of changing of the neighborhood, approving an NCD, feels like you're losing the value that you've been paying for. And right, and there's also some objection about the city both promoting the heritage preservation plan at the same time that they're promoting dense development on the side of the church lot that's adjacent to Southwood.
Okay.
So there are a couple different things. So one, demolition in a neighborhood conservation district. There is no review of demolition. There is in a neighborhood conservation district. There is review of what goes back there, but there's no demolition permit review. So that would not go to Bhavesh at all. That would just be like any demo review, right? Or you review already. Right,
Neighborhood all about what the neighborhood wants to, what the.
Right.
What the neighborhood. How the city will help if they need help. To kind of guide them. There's some consultants who work. They have prepared a body for the native conservation plan, which is part of information in their manual. So they prepare a conservation plan and they tell their neighborhood, okay, we don't regulate this. If they decide to regulate demolitions, then they are completely refused. Requiring to regulate demolition if you choose to go to native conservation. That's clear. That's clear in the ordinance. Demolition is not regulated in native conservation. In heritage district, yes, it is regulated. And again, that's again to neighborhood, they decide to go to the heritage district route. Then they need to understand what are the parameters of demolition. You can still demolish it, but there are criteria you got to meet. Having said that, I mean, we have folks from Haggard Park here, but these have been demolished in Haggard Park. That have been approved for demolition by the Heritage Commission. So it's not that it cannot happen. It's just they have to meet the criteria that are in the ordinance.
In that part, that they demos,
Yes.
how many houses?
I don't know off the top of my head, but I can get you the information tomorrow. I can never do that.
So, the one house, the 2 bedroom houses that should be done.
And that if the owner choose not to demolish, we can't go and demolish. This is to the owner, they need to apply to demolish them, pretty kind of demolish. That's.
No, I know, but to get it demolished in Heritage District, it's almost impossible. I just want to, I've been dealing with them for 15 years.
okay, I would just make sure everyone on Zoom has heard, so Bhavesh clarified that what goes back, even in a conservation district, would be based on the design manual that the neighborhood would design together. So, and first of all, they would have to choose to become a conservation district together. What goes back, I mean, they theoretically, one could say that 3-story townhouses are okay in our conservation district. It's a neighborhood driven thing. Two, that Bhavesh pointed out that even right now in the ordinance, demolition is not reviewed in a conservation district, but even in a heritage district, there is a process and there have been some things that have been demolished, even in Haggard Park, which is a designated heritage district. I know there's a gentleman in the second row who's been waiting very patiently. That's had a question.
You don't like my question?
I'm right. I am been waiting so patiently for this question. I cannot wait.
How many actual people? The numbers. That should
How many actual people looked up? So how we do everything is we, and there. How many people? So there was a team of 5 qualified architectural historians internally with, yes, and we all meet the Secretary of the Interior's qualification standards, which is a requirement that for our profession. And then everything was discussed with Bhavesh and with Mike, who you might know with planning, Eric's predecessor, and with Eric. So a team of 8 people looked at everything together, but this is a draft. And now, starting tomorrow, this is not a final document. Everyone in the city, well, I mean, I guess you don't even have to live in the city of Plano to get access to it. It's going to be online. It's going to be released to the general public now. So this is the first take with 8 people's input, but now we're sending it out to you and asking everyone, as many people as possible, to give us input.
I mean, you're asking us, we have to do everything ourselves, we can do it, right? That's what you said. I won't frame it. I won't.
Okay. Okay, so the question was, can there be a question of this, a copy of the sign-in sheet? And the answer is that the sign-in sheet can be online. Can be posted online.
to deny, city council vote 3-0 to approve. We have to trust those people, half of which were elected with no term, and that was responsibility all over the state.
Yeah, there's a question about lack of trust with the. But also say the first step is to look at the recommendations because the vast majority of properties are not even eligible. So I would say if you have a question, come talk to me, look at the report tomorrow. But the vast majority of properties in the survey area are not even eligible. So it's not even a conversation. So even if your neighbors want it, it doesn't meet the criteria. So that's the first step, is to see if you're even eligible. Because a large percentage are not. It's only a few select properties that are even eligible to use these tools. Yes, sir.
And I'm new. And one issue is the lack of clarity of what we're actually talking.
Okay.
That your company was hired by City of Plano. And you came up here 18? Right? 2018, 2019, somewhere in there. You started all this. Right? Am I wrong so far?
No, this survey was.
This is done in 2023.
Yeah,
There was a separate contract in 2018, and there were meetings like this in 2018. Correct.
All of these things, the majority of the 10 years, 20 years, 30 years, 50 years. And the information that you're giving them is that, okay, well, I know you've been in your house for 50 years, but if the neighbors around your neighborhood, your backyard, whatever, decide they want to do one or the other, then you've got to live with it because that's what it is. If the majority passes.
Super majority.
Super majority passes.
Mhm.
It takes a little bit of their freedom. I'm not saying you're doing it personally. I'm saying it's taking a little bit of their freedom away to do what they want to do. And it says things on there like, you know, you have to get reviews to do new construction. You have to get reviews to get alterations done. And these folks have been taking care of their houses for 50 years by themselves, without asking anybody, not having an HOA. They've been handling it themselves. With, I'm sure everybody's happy with their home and what's going on with them. But now you're saying, okay, we're doing this and we're gonna, and if we decide that you can have the neighborhood conservation district, and you go through all the efforts of talking to all your neighbors and getting all that for them, we can send it up to the hill and help and say no. After you put all that effort into it. Am I wrong so far?
I think you're right.
But hopefully your neighbor.
I think you're that there's some property owners who have lived in their house for a long time that see this as taking away some control over the property if the neighborhood as a whole approves it, and if a supermajority of the boards and commissions approve it, that the majority the majority opinion could outweigh a minority opinion, and some perhaps fear that if you're a minority opinion, you might lose your voice. And I would say that that's part of the challenge of a democracy. And that is a legitimate fear. I mean, everyone has this is your most valuable investment. And I'm glad you're this is the right time to bring that up and to bring that up with your neighbors. It's always a balance of giving people tools and options. This is not something that just Bhavesh dreamed up. There are people who in the public who ask for these tools. So it's a balance of trying to give people tools and options and a democratic process. In Texas, the democratic process is weighted very heavily towards property rights. I mean, there's a super majority is at the state level. That's a requirement, is weighted very heavily towards property rights. But these are, some of these decisions are kind of outside the scope of what we're operating within state and federal law with this. This is kind of just how planning works, but making your voice heard and bringing up these issues. Yes, it is a trade-off. If anyone is interested in this, you have to understand that there are trade-offs involved, and there's no reason to not be candid about them at the outset, and to really have those hard conversations with your neighbors.
For me, reading this stuff, understanding what they say, the language that's either clouds what we're talking about or it means superior. If something says you're going to get a tax exemption, you're going to get a tax deduction, but then we start talking about them, we find out that you have to have, it has to be a business, it has to be whatever it is, and it's not a single family home that this gentleman or that lady's been living in. Is not clear clarification of what we're actually talking about.
I apologize for that then, because that's not City of Plano, that's state and federal government, and I brought that in separate. That's not part of this project. If that
What I'm thinking is that I really want this in plain terms and not things that my grandmother can understand. I want it in terms that I can actually get. That's not it.
I totally understand where you're coming from. For better or worse, this is a complicated process that operates in a very complicated legal framework. And if you come to me with your specific property, I can give you some clear answers, but there is a lot of nuance that does make it challenging, that we are operating within this framework of multiple, it's things that have multiple different layers of legal framework that do make it very complicated. There's a heritage ordinance, there's an NCD ordinance, there are state regulations, there are federal regulations. So there's a lot of nuance, and I don't want to oversimplify and give misinformation. And that's, unfortunately, that's why I have a job as a preservation consultant, because it is very complicated. So come talk to me if you want a little bit more clarity about your specific neighborhood or property. But there are a lot of contradictions in the laws. There's a lot of nuance in the different laws. That's just the framework we operate in.
Give you the information again. If you still have other questions, talk to me.
Again, it really has to be clear enough that it makes sense to, Mrs. Jones, who's 85 years old and she's a widower and doesn't read district jargon, and it needs to be, it's actually as simple to a person that's 25 years old, the first house they grow. It needs to be in a way that everyone can make a educated in how they want to do it. And whether it's this plan or that plan or no plan at all, it's their own voice of what needs to be, make that make sense. That's all I'm saying.
Let's say our neighborhood doesn't act at all. Maybe we know we just acquire with the entity, we might even not even care. If that opens the door for the city to maybe try to change zoning, kind of push owners to sell your property because you need the land, people start selling, and all they go to.
Does that, okay, so the question was, because the neighborhood chooses not to do a heritage district or an NCD, does that mean that your neighborhood becomes more prime for unlimited development? And that's a really hard question, because it depends on what everyone else around you does too. So, I mean, there is I tend to think in general, I've worked in this field a long time, designations tend to be few and far between. So my hunch is that there hardly anyone is going to actually opt to do this. You know, from the whole 2018 report, only one property, Texas Pool, chose to move forward. There's just as much supply of unregulated land as there was before. Okay, I guess that's your concern, is that the supply of unregulated lands might go down and your unregulated lands might become more rare. That's a good question, but historically that has not been borne out, especially not in Texas. But I don't. Sir.
Oh, no, I was curious. About like EOA 5 so what I'm curious is like fine, like what if they did the NCD and within that, and then someone doesn't come up with whatever the framework they come up with, are there fines in the city can hand out or whatever, when the neighbors can say, hey, I'm gonna snitch on the neighbor and say, he's not doing what he's doing. We find, we put a fine, I mean, your experience with that happening?
That's a question for Bhavesh. I don't know.
Again, I think it comes from. They prepare the legal conservation. And they dictate what to regulate, so they can decide. Like once the reports come
Say, you don't follow it. Then you're never gonna decide about it, playing, don't follow it. But your penalty is still to get back.
right, that's what I'm saying, then they decide in that plan, it says, if some property owner does not follow this legal plan. Fine.
Correct me if I'm wrong, but I think that a fine would actually have to be Eric, you might know this, a separate ordinance. That would be separate from the plan, that there would have to be a new law a new city ordinance passed to initiate a fine. I don't think that can be done within the present plan.
You know,
Okay.
I think if they decide to impose a fine, something does not get done as per the plan, and if the neighbor decides that they should be fined, then the city will have to pursue the enforcement route. Again, the neighborhood dictates, wants to go that route.
I'm not an attorney, but my understanding is that if the neighborhood wanted to have a fine to help enforce the NCD ordinance, they would have to have the NCD plan. And then they also would have to enact a separate ordinance that puts that fine in place. I'm not sure about that, but I think it would be a two-step process.
So-
That's a question for Bhavesh. Are there fines in the historic district?
When these cases, when it goes to, court and things like that, and the court imposes this fine. But as department, as the ordinance, we have not been able to impose fine.
So the question for the folks on Zoom is are there fines for the heritage districts? The answer is yes, but they've never been levied from the city.
Yes, the CA is approved.
Okay, there was a question over here. The specific houses and businesses, let's see if I can get to that. So most of those. So first of all, we're not looking at the city as a whole. We're only looking at a certain area of things that were built between 70 and 75. So there was another round. We've looked at older things before. We're just looking at this one piece. So most of the houses, and we all have to go through the criteria in the city of Plano's ordinance. Most of the houses are associated with significant people. But the Country Burger and the Thunderbird skating rink are just kind of more community gathering places. There are things that they've maintained their look from when they were built in the 70s. There really are only those two things that you look at and you're like, wow, that really looks like a 70s commercial building in Plano. And they meet those two criteria that are about familiar features of in community gathering places in the city.
The reason the original Benton home and the Douglas Elementary at the same time.
Absolutely. So if you are interested in an individual heritage landmark and you're not on this list because the research didn't uncover, there is always a disclaimer that if there's more research, additional things may come to light. And there was a process earlier on asking for research, but if you bring it to light now, that's why we're sending it out for comments. So if you have information about the owner of your house that you think is significant and you want that to be included, please send us that information with the comment process. Yes, did I miss someone over here? He spoke.
That limits area that you already defined, or is it could be just a street?
Define neighborhood. This is a very good question. How do you define neighborhood for a neighborhood conservation district or a heritage district? So we've started with a subdivision as our base unit. If there are and you'll see in the map here, if there are Dallas North Estates #1 and #2, we've grouped that together in one neighborhood. But if only #1 is interested and #2 isn't, you could break it apart. A district can be as few as 2 buildings. So we've worked with the subdivision because it's a manageable unit. But yeah, you could be as few as 2 buildings and work together. These boundaries are just a starting point for conversation. But yeah, it could be only 1 street. It could be bigger too if you and the adjacent neighborhood have very similar character or want to work together. So drawing boundaries would be part of the process. This is just a starting point for boundaries. Sir.
Yeah, so that has. If it becomes PHR, does that impact my? Let's say that has become PHR, we decide we don't want to be an NCP. Is there any kind of effect on properties around it?
So the question is if adjacent building becomes an individual PHR, is there any control of the adjacent properties or properties in the buffer? And the answer is no, none at all. I mean, other than your zoning. How are we on time? I know Bhavesh wants to talk about the plan too.
Can take a few more if you want.
Okay, take a few more, and Bhavesh, you just tell me when we need to transition. Yes, sir.
And to reflect the views of those people as people, is there a way to build into it something like laws or an expiration date?
That's a great point.
By whoever's living in the neighborhood at that point.
That's a great point. And the question is whether the neighborhood conservation district manual or the plan could have a sunset clause. So that as you know, if it's being grassroots driven by this specific set of owners, if they move on and the new owners won't be interested, there's an opportunity for them to have their voice. And I think that's a fabulous idea. And you know, that may be something that we want to, part of this is not only the providing recommendations for specific houses and neighborhoods, but also changes to ordinance language and to the conservation district manual. And, you know, if things like that, things like the fine, the sunset clause, if you want to have us recommend that goes into the preservation plan as a potential change to the conservation district manual or something like that too, let us know. And it'll just kind of become a list for the Heritage Preservation Office to know what people are thinking about too, in terms of policy, not just these specific buildings. Okay. Let me get you.
Questions, you can take it back, so. just want to talk about real quick about the reason we are doing this is mainly to update the preservation plan. A lot of you all remember we updated a preservation plan back in 2018. This robust document was a significant effort.
Do you want to take the?
But Emily was also part of this project as well. She did the survey back in 2018 when we developed this plan. So this plan is an official document that basically dictates what we need to do in the next 5 years for heritage preservation. So like one of the aspects of this plan is to update the inventory of heritage buildings. Like for example, Texas Pool got designated this year. So we'll go ahead and add Texas Pool in this document as a new designated property in the inventory. Likewise, we update the inventory of list of potential heritage resources, which is the main component of this plan update this time around that Emily and her team is working. So the outcomes of her findings and recommendations are going to go in that aspect of the plan. The other main component is goals and objectives of the heritage preservation plan. The chapter, I think 6 in this document is again an extensive list. I'm going to show it to you in a minute that sets the goals and objectives of what we want to do in the next 5 years. And staff and commission and everybody has been working on it. We accomplished some goals, but there are still a long list to go. So we'll continue to work on that. And then lastly, it also, asks to seek community inputs and feedback. And this is exactly what we are doing today. We always had this plan in place since 81. And we always did updates quite regularly. This one was updated in 2018. So as you all know, it's almost 5 years. So it's time to update this. So the approach that we are taking this time around to update this document is, since we already have a robust document in place, we are just doing basic administrative updates and any things that have been designated and things like that. So this plan has these kind of 7 chapters of this book, as you see snippets of each of the chapters. So what we are doing is on the 6 of these chapters are just very minor updates outlined in the blue box. And the major update is going to be in the chapter 5, which is the potential heritage resources, which is again going to be survey and findings and recommendations based on Emily's findings, which she shared most of the information with you all today, like again, getting the list of PHR, individual properties, district, and the new component will be potentially eligible neighborhood conservation district. So some of the minor updates that we are doing in those 6 chapters, I showed it to you earlier, is again, chapter 1 and 2 are just administrative updates. Updating, like for example, back then we named the preservation plan as Preservation Plano 150 because we celebrated 150th birthday this year. So this plan was leading us into that birthday, 150th year birthday. So next year we will be removing that name and logos and associated with that. So it's just administrative updates, chapter 1 and 2. Chapter 3 is a timeline. A lot of you all know that timeline is extensively used. It's a graphical timeline that shows, Plano's story, So again, we're going to add to this timeline based on what has happened in Plano in the last 5 years, just major events. Like, for example, I think everybody went through COVID pandemic happened, so that's going to be a part of the timeline. We have some amazing developments happening in the city, the Calling Court redevelopment and things like that. So we're going to add that in the timeline. The other timeline we have is the heritage preservation timeline. We're going to update that because a lot has happened in the 5 years for the preservation program. We've accomplished a lot. I'll show you a slide, what we've done in that. Then chapter 4 is updating new designations, like the Texas Pool got designated this year. So we're going to add that in a designation. Chapter 6 is the one that talks about recommendations, the goals and policies that with public feedback, we added that last year. So it's an extensive list. We don't anticipate any changes in that. Again, some of the changes that's going to happen is again based on the recommendation that comes out of the Heritage Resource Survey project. And lastly, we have this appendix section where we have an amazing implementation matrix. You see an image in the lower right-hand corner that takes each of the actions and puts it against a timeline and priority and supporting partners, like, what is the timeline to accomplish each of those action items, and who are involved in accomplishing that and that's kind of thing. So just to show you an example, the items listed in blue are the action items that currently we are working on. The one identified as the red is the action item that we have accomplished. Like we have adopted the design standards for the districts, and then we have surveyed some of the neighborhoods that were asked to survey. We adopted a neighborhood conservation district tool that, we talked about it today. So this is the timeline I was talking about. So on your left side, that's the Plano story timeline in this plan that we're going to update, just basic what happened in 5 years. On the right side, you will see the heritage preservation timeline. And the items in the blue are the ones that we have accomplished in the 5 years a lot. We have updated our design standards for both the districts. We have updated our surveys between 70 and 75 as part of this project. We have adopted a neighborhood conservation district tool. We have accomplished adopting a backyard cottage ordinance. So a lot has happened. We have had a new designation of Texas Pool. So we're going to add this to the heritage preservation timeline and expand it further so that it's updated to 2023. Some of the major updates that is happening in Chapter 5 is, again, as I mentioned, update the list of potential heritage resources for both individual properties and districts, and add a new list of potential neighborhood conservation districts as an outcome of Emily's project. There are also some more research required that are identified, which she and her team could not get an access. So again, we just keep on continuing our efforts to try and get an access to those properties to be able to survey those properties, and then update the heritage resource map that you see on the lower right-hand corner is just the currently designated properties in Plano or potentially eligible properties in Plano. So we'll update that map. So these are some of the images from this plan that you see will be just updated based on her findings and recommendations. So I just want to spend a little bit time on this implementation matrix, because this is where we are trying to seek inputs from you all. Again, it's a big document, so I know you'll take time to provide comments. So we will have this document also online on our website. So I encourage you all to go and look at this chapter and let us know if you all would like to change anything, like any of the action statements or any of the, this is the implementation matrix I'm talking about. They are divided into 7 components: the survey, growth, redevelopment, emerging trends, placemaking, community and design, education and awareness, benefits and protection, and program administration. So we have 7 components. Out of that, we have 100 action statements outlined in 2018. So which is, again, pretty robust, that we continue to work on and try to, achieve certain goals. But again, if you all think that we need to add more goals, more action statements, if you all think something is not there, let us know, again, through your comment section and things like that. And so that's what we are here to just grab your inputs and feedbacks. Again, as I mentioned earlier, do you all want to see any new action statements or policies added onto this document? Do you think there are any new lead players or supporting partners that are identified in this implementation matrix needs to be changed or added on? Please let us know, and that kind of thing. So we just want to gather your inputs and feedback to update this section of the document. And that's pretty much, I'll be able to answer any questions you might have related to the preservation plan.
We'll be here if anyone asks specific.
Yeah, there's some maps around, so feel free to see, and then we'll be able to talk. Thank you again for attending. Really appreciate it. Your time. Are there any questions on Zoom? Questions on Zoom? Any questions on Zoom? Okay.
I'm going to shut down the series. Texas for 2. Okay. Thank you so much, everybody on Zoom, and we'll be in touch.
Thank you so much. Great. And you kept your voice.
Hold on.